Yeah, Jake, and not really just casting a shadow, I should note they're literally casting images of this on Windsor Castle earlier tonight to kind of remind everyone of those ties that you mentioned there with Jeffrey Epstein. This was done, I should note 4 people have actually been arrested as a result of this, and these images that we recorded here showing that alleged birthday letter that was in the Jeffrey Epstein book that was released, pictures of with Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, that's that old footage from Mar-a-Lago.
Señores, lo que sucedió en el Reino Unido fue bastante humillante para el trumpismo. Apenas Donald Trump aterrizó en Windsor, lo recibieron con lo que realmente se merece. Protestas masivas. Y ojo que no fueron protestas suaves. No, señores, gente que está harta y se lo dejaron claro. Bienvenido a Windsor, Trump, pero lárgate ya. Y no es para menos, porque fuera del castillo de Windsor, donde supuestamente iba a encontrarse con el rey Carlos, proyectaron en las paredes las imágenes que Trump más odia en este momento. Fotos de él con Jeffrey Epstein, con el príncipe Andrés y con Ghislaine Maxwell. Veamos ese momento.
President Trump just touched down for his second state visit to the United Kingdom, but amidst the fanfare of his pending meetings with the royal family and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is still casting quite a shadow all the way across the Atlantic. CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins is on the ground near Windsor Castle. Caitlin, explain the connection here.
Yeah, Jake, and not really just casting a shadow, I should note they're literally casting images of this on Windsor Castle earlier tonight to kind of remind everyone of those ties that you mentioned there with Jeffrey Epstein. This was done, I should note 4 people have actually been arrested as a result of this, and these images that we recorded here showing that alleged birthday letter that was in the Jeffrey Epstein book that was released, pictures of with Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, that's that old footage from Mar-a-Lago. They also are posting images of the president's mugshot. I'm not so sure he would mind that one. They have it hanging inside the halls of the West Wing. But Jake, the one thing that the British Prime Minister and President Trump do have in common is they've now both had to fire senior officials in their orbit as a result of their ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, Trump did so in his first term with his then Labor Secretary Alex Acosta, the one who negotiated that sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein years before he was the Labor Secretary, but something that became a sense of intense scrutiny, obviously, after Jeffrey Epstein's federal charges that he was facing. And most recently, for the British Prime Minister, had to fire his ambassador to the United States, a huge position and certainly a critical one, especially ahead of a state visit over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, something that was known before he took the job, but became much clearer after a lot of this information became public, including emails and messages.
Todo su pasado oscuro exhibido frente a millones. El resultado: 4 personas arrestadas por la policía británica por esa protesta visual. Y yo digo, ¿no? En vez de arrestarlo, más bien deberían de darles una medalla olímpica. Claro, eso sí, que Trump no se la robe, como acostumbra. Pero bueno, esto nos demuestra una vez más cómo es que la gente europea ve el trumpismo. Trump no es bienvenido, y con mucha razón. Estamos hablando de un tipo que fue declarado civilmente culpable de abuso sexual, que ya es un convicto de 34 delitos graves en Estados Unidos. Es un fraude viviente, un enemigo de la democracia. Y aún así lo invitan a codearse con el rey, de locos, ¿no? Y lo peor es que todavía Keir Starmer, primer ministro británico, lo haya recibido. O sea, es increíble que le abran las puertas a un autócrata fracasado. Mientras tanto, ¿qué es lo que hace Donald Trump? En sus redes sociales no para de hablar de la crisis económica real en Estados Unidos. Se dedica a publicar fotos sexistas de Fannie Willis en traje de baño, totalmente ridículo y sacado de contexto, cuando en realidad lo que tenemos es un mercado de la vivienda totalmente inalcanzable, precios disparados como nunca en la historia, una inflación que aprieta a las familias, consumidores que están endeudados hasta el cuello. Pero claro, Trump solo piensa en su ego, en atacar a la prensa y en difundir teorías absurdas. De hecho, justo antes de viajar al Reino Unido, explotó contra el periodista John Carr de ABC porque se atrevió a preguntarle sobre la censura y la fiscal general Pam Bondi. ¿Qué hizo Trump? Lo amenazó, lo señaló como fake news. Porque, pues bueno, no se olviden, lo autoritario y lo repulsivo que es, nunca va a pasar de moda. Veamos ese momento.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
She'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to...
Y bueno, hablando de farsas, Donald Trump presumió que habló con el primer ministro Modi de India, cuando todos sabemos que más bien lo ha ignorado durante meses luego de que Trump lo haya insultado. Eso nos demuestra lo patético que es. Si alguien lo deja en visto, si alguien lo ignora, Donald Trump corre detrás rogando tu atención. Ese es el gran negociador del que él tanto presume. Un matón que se derrumba cuando lo enfrentan. Pero bueno, la ignorancia de Trump ya no sorprende. Lo que sí sorprende, señores, es lo bajo que está en las encuestas. Su aprobación ha caído a mínimos históricos, incluso peor que en el año 2017, en su primer mandato. Para mí, eso es una consecuencia directa de su corrupción, de su ineptitud. Veamos lo que dijeron algunos gobernadores al respecto. Empecemos con el gobernador Pritzker.
He's attacking verbally, sometimes he attacks sending his agents in, sometimes he forgets. I think he might be suffering from some dementia. And the next day he'll wake up on the other side of the bed and stop talking about Chicago.
As immigration and customs enforcement agents carry out missions across Illinois, Governor Pritzker has noticed a shift in their strategy.
They seem to be going in with more people than they have over the last couple of weeks. It appears that they were gathering their troops, so to speak, and they intend now to operate in a more militarized fashion, using ICE instead of National Guard.
Luego tenemos al gobernador Tim Walz, que también tiene algo que aportar.
We want to make sure that crime is down. It is, but we can always do better. They should be partners with us. Just this week, they cut our counterterrorism funding, money that we could use to protect schools. We could use it to help fund our police, making sure we could hire more. But I'll tell you what doesn't make people feel safe? A tank next to Chipotle. It's stupid, and it's for the cameras, and you can get into the legal aspect of posse comitatus, but it's foundational. So I keep saying, Jen, where are the don't tread on me people? We were told for years that we needed to be prepared about an overbearing federal government that would step in over local control and actually put troops on the streets. I mean, where are those people? And I would just ask them to rise up. And this isn't the way things should be done. And again, he doesn't really have any interest in stopping the crime. If he did, he would go with the professionals. He would listen to local law enforcement. He would coordinate with us. I will tell you, we do have a great example, and this is why some of our institutions are still holding. We got a U.S. attorney out here who's a great partner, doing good work for us on many fronts. And that's because he coordinates with state agencies, coordinates with local officials. That's what we should be doing. This for the camera, I'm a big tough guy. I also said, Jen, on that, and I'm still going to hold to this. I still think at some points he puts on a military uniform because it's just cosplaying with his administration, whether Kristi Noem's dressing up as one thing or another. But come out here and help us. We don't disagree with you that there's more that we can do, but what you're prescribing is nothing but vengeance and photo ops. That's not helping anyone.
Y luego el gobernador Shapiro, que tiene palabras importantes.
Let me be clear, violence is never okay, regardless of the motivation. Violence is never the answer. And we cannot allow violence to be used as a pretext for more violence. We must reject the rhetoric of vengeance and instead focus, as you are today, on the work of healing. We need to create more opportunities for peaceful and respectful dialogue, respecting each other's fundamental rights as Americans. Censorship, using the long arm of government to silence people, to silence businesses and nonprofits and restrict their right to free speech, well, that will not solve this problem. Prosecuting constitutionally protected speech will only further erode our freedoms and deepen the mistrust. That is un-American. There is a better way. There is a better way.
Palabras poderosas que nos muestran lo que la gente con sentido común ya entiende, que Donald Trump es un peligro. Por si faltaba más, su ex abogado criminalista y ahora el número 2 del Departamento de Justicia, Todd Blanche, fue quien se reunió con Ghislaine Maxwell, recordemos, le dio esta inmunidad y hasta la trasladó a una prisión de mínima seguridad. Hablamos de una traficante de menores convicta. ¿Cuál fue su justificación? Que Maxwell merecía la oportunidad de hablar. Que literalmente estamos hablando de una persona que ya ha sido sentenciada, que ya tuvo su oportunidad en el juicio y decidió mentir, decidió acogerse a la quinta enmienda. El tribunal lo dejó clarísimo. No tenía ninguna credibilidad. Y aún así, este tipo la protege. Vean esto y díganme ustedes si no es indignante.
But when you met with her, did you find her to be credible?
It's an impossible question to answer. I met with her for 2 days. To determine whether a witness is credible takes weeks and weeks and weeks. I asked her questions that I believe all of us wanted answered, and she answered them. She answered them. The point of the interview was not for me to pressure test every single answer she gave. Of course not. The point of the interview was to give her an opportunity to speak, which nobody had done before. And so she had been in prison for many, many years, and she had offered to speak on many, many occasions. And she was never given that opportunity. And so what I did is I gave her that opportunity to speak. It was recorded. My questions were there. And whether her answers were credible or truthful, there's a lot of information out there about Mr. Epstein, about her, and whether what she said is completely wrong or completely right or a little of both. That's the reason why we released the transcript. That's why we were transparent about the questions I asked and the answers she gave, is because it's really up to the American people to determine whether they believe that her answers were credible or whether they found her not credible.
En fin, todo esto es una radiografía de lo que representa el trumpismo. Corrupción, abusos, mentiras y privilegios para criminales mientras el pueblo sufre. Y lo más importante, ¿no? Cuando lo enfrentamos, cuando lo exponemos, se derrumba. Ahora bien, señores, otra cosa que se derrumba es la economía en los Estados Unidos. Oficialmente, la Fed ha justificado el recorte por el enfriamiento del mercado laboral, por la necesidad de tener que ajustar el mandato dual, controlar la inflación, mantener el empleo. Pero ojo, señores, porque aquí no solo hablamos de economía, ¿no? Estamos hablando de que existen presiones políticas, los intentos de Donald Trump por querer manipular el Banco Central y cómo sus intereses personales pueden estar pesando mucho más que la salud de la economía. Escuchemos esta noticia.
Quarter of a point, David.
Yeah, this was largely expected, Katie, going into this meeting. It's what Wall Street thought would happen here. And the reason for it is there is a sense on many members of this committee that the Fed is a bit behind the curve here when they look at the labor side of the Fed's dual mandate. So for so long, really since COVID, a huge focus has been on the inflation picture, and inflation remains higher than the Fed would like it to be. The target is around 2%. We're still removed from that. But in recent weeks, we've seen deteriorating data when it comes to the jobs market, when it comes to the labor market. And I think back on the monthly jobs data for August, the revisions that we saw to payrolls on the heels of that, weekly jobless claims. So that's made the Fed have to shift its focus a bit. Again, I mentioned that dual mandate, which is a wonky term, but the Fed has these two goals. One is to focus on price stability or getting inflation under control and keeping it under control. The other is trying to achieve maximum employment. And I think what you see here today is the Fed acknowledging that, making this small cut, not going as big as the president and some others have agitated for, and really going in line here again, Katie, with what Wall Street expected.
Ron, there was a pretty crazy downgrade in the jobs numbers for the 2024-2025 year from April to March of this year. And that led people to think, well, maybe they're going to cut it by a half a basis point. Why the smaller step? Why not take it not all the way. Why not take it farther, given the cooling off in the jobs market?
There's a cooling off in the jobs market, but there's not a cooling off in consumer spending. Now, Mark Zandi of Moody's Economics points out that the top 10% of wage earners are spending 49% of the dollars that are going out into the economy. So there is an uneven economy that we have, and inflation
so
still
the rich
has,
are doing well, is what you're
rich
saying.
are doing well, yeah, with K-shaped economy, as they like to call it. You know, the bottom not doing as well as the top. And we also have inflation that's still stuck, and the Fed references that in its statement. And so the quarter point, widely expected, widely telegraphed. The Fed doesn't really like to surprise markets. The only person who voted for a half-point cut was Stephen Myron, who just joined the Fed yesterday.
And how do you interpret that?
He's doing the president's bidding. He is still, by the way, the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, even though he is on paid leave, which is unusual. That has not happened really since before the 1930s, that someone in the White House or in Treasury has been sitting on the board of the Federal Reserve.
Why has it not happened before?
To keep the Fed independent and separate from the political whims that come out of the White House. But this is different. He's sitting on the Fed while taking a leave from his job inside the White House. What's interesting is that Governors Lawler and Bowman, who had advocated for a July rate cut and didn't get it, voted with Jay Powell for the quarter-point cut. So the dissents were not as numerous nor as large as we'd anticipated.
All right, Justin, give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, look, the headline that we've cut interest rates by a quarter of percentage points, exactly what the economy required. It's what everyone's been asking for. Wall Street agrees. Conventional economic models agree. This is business as usual. But there's something I got to tell you has got my goat here. Stephen Moran's dissent. This is extremely bad news. So this is a guy who's under suspicion that he's there as Trump's boy, that he's there to undermine the independence of the central bank. The norms of the institution are it would be very unusual to dissent in your first meeting. This is the clearest possible message that he is there to do the White House's bidding. This is another brick in the wall of Fed independence that's coming down, and I'm frankly profoundly disappointed in him.
Peter, give me a little bit more about the relationship between Stephen Myron and the White House and the president.
Yeah, I mean, the justice just said, I mean, you do not normally have somebody who technically is on the White House payroll as an independent governor of the board. It's not surprising that he voted the way he did today. This is what he was sent there to do. And it's often true that presidential appointees, even if they don't maintain White House ties, newly arrived, try to push for the agenda of a president, but to dissent and leave himself on the outside is pretty unusual. Look, this is what the president's been pushing for. It's just not as much as he has pushed for, and not as early and not as extensive as he's pushed for. So he'll probably continue to pressure the Fed to do more, do go faster, right? He refers to Jay Powell as too late. Jay Powell as his way of denigrating him. But the other message here that's really interesting and kind of contradictory is the president wants to tell us the economy is doing great. At the same time, he's pushing the Fed to lower interest rates because the economy isn't doing great, because, in fact, it needs the juice that an interest rate cut would provide.
Katie, one of the reasons the president is pushing the Fed to lower interest rates as well is to reduce the debt service burden that the United States has. For every 1 percentage point cut in interest rates, you reduce the payments that the Treasury has to make on the outstanding debt. And this has been one of the president's big things.
Also, the president he's a real estate guy.
Yeah.
So interest rates for him are key, because if you have an interest rate that is too high, it makes building very difficult. It makes buying properties very difficult, taking loans out very difficult. The interest rate itself has always been key to his business life.
Yeah, to a large extent. But I think in this particular instance, the cost of servicing the debt, he has referenced, on numerous occasions, and he wants it down. He would like the Fed to cut rates by 3 full percentage points, down to 1%, to save, quite hundreds of billions of dollars a year in debt service costs. Now, that would be wildly inflationary if the Fed were ever to acquiesce to his desire, but that doesn't seem to bother him all that much.
David, the Fed also projects an additional 50 basis point cut by the year end, perhaps another 25 basis points of cuts in the next 2 years as well. So they are projecting that they're going to continue needing to cut interest rates. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm looking here, and I think that I've got a sense here that that's inverted. Maybe one more cut this year, and then 50 basis points of cuts in the year ahead. I mean, I think that it just highlights what I was talking about, Katie, which is there is still this huge element of uncertainty surrounding the state of the U.S. economy at this point in time. And Let's talk about inflation first. Again, still higher than the Fed wants it to be at, still has a lot of stickiness, as economists are fond of saying, and there's so much uncertainty about the effect that the president's trade policies are going to have on inflation going forward. So again, there's that side of the mandate. Turning to the labor market, there's this new spate of uncertainty over sort of what's going on with the job market. We see, again, those revisions. We see the jobless numbers going up. It's posing concern here. It's presenting concern here for members of this committee. And I think looking forward here, there's a sense that, again, they're going to have to cut. I suspect what we're going to hear from the Fed chair in the next few minutes when he has his press conference is him echoing a refrain he uses over and over again, which is that this committee is going to continue to be driven by data. These recent data have been interesting, unsettling, and I think they're going to be even more paramount going forward here. I should say before the next meeting in October, we're going to get new data on inflation and the jobs market, and they're going to continue to be key here for policymakers at the Fed.
Justin, we were talking about the K-shaped economy. The rich are doing well. The not rich are not doing as well. Christine Romans and I have talked about the no hire, no fire economy. We're seeing unemployment tick up, but also people who are unemployed take longer to get reemployed. They're sitting outside of the job market for longer. Is this sort of thing, a rate cut of 25%, is that going to help businesses hire more?
Bueno amigos, aquí está la clave. Mientras la Fed está intentando mostrar que toma decisiones, yo diría técnicas, ¿no? Lo cierto es que existe una mano invisible que está empujando desde la Casa Blanca. Donald Trump lleva meses exigiendo recortes mucho más agresivos. Es más, se pensaba que iban a haber recortes no del 0,25, señores, recortes mucho más grandes. Pero bueno, se supone que él quiere hasta 3 puntos completos, según las últimas indicaciones por parte de ellos. ¿Por qué? Porque así le conviene a él. Abarata la deuda federal, impulsa artificialmente lo que es la construcción, su negocio de toda la vida, y le da un respiro político, ¿no? En plena crisis de confianza. El problema es que esto no es un simple ajuste contable. Cuando un presidente presiona de esa manera a la Reserva Federal, lo que hace es destruir la independencia de esta institución. Una Fed que responde a caprichos políticos, ¿no?, de un presidente en turno, en lugar de los datos económicos. Para mí eso es una receta al desastre. Inflación descontrolada. Estancamiento económico. Y en el peor de los casos, amigos, lo que ya muchos economistas llaman la mini estanflación, con precios altos y menos empleos al mismo tiempo. Sé que algunos defensores de Trump me dirán, bueno, bajar las tasas ayuda a la gente común, abarata créditos e hipotecas, ¿no? Y sí, señores, en el corto plazo puede parecer un alivio porque lo único que hacen es activar nuevamente la maquinita de impresión de dinero. ¿Pero a qué costo? Porque lo que no te dicen es que este tipo de recortes apresurados pueden disparar aún mucho más los precios de los alimentos, de la energía, de los servicios básicos. Y esto termina golpeando a quienes menos tienen. Mientras tanto, los ricos, ese 10% que concentra casi la mitad del consumo, van a seguir blindados y gastando como si nada. En resumen, la Fed, señores, ha dado un pequeño paso, pero Trump quiere convertirlo en un salto mortal sin tener una red. No le importa la estabilidad a largo plazo, le importa esa foto inmediata y salvar su propia piel política. Y los ciudadanos, pues, son los que terminan pagando la factura. Pero bueno, ahora quiero saber qué opinan ustedes. ¿Creen que este recorte es una medida necesaria para poder frenar la crisis laboral? ¿O simplemente será otro movimiento manipulado por el trumpismo para su propio beneficio? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerden, como siempre, darle like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.